Hi and Assalamualaikum. My name is Nur Shazwani binti Muhammad Jumaid and my number metric is 10DAT21F1020. We are from Group 4 and today we will be presenting about tutorial question 1. For the question 1 will be explained by me. The question is, audit documentation play a critical role in providing support for the auditor reports and evidence of the auditor compliance with auditing standard. Before we discuss this statement, we need to know what the meaning of audit documentation. Based on ISA 230, audit documentation is the record of audit procedure performed, relevant audit evidence obtained, and the conclusion reached by the auditor. Moreover, audit documentation can be known as audit working paper, audit work paper, and lastly, audit file. So, why audit documentation play a critical role for the auditor report? This is because through the process, there will be evidence that need to be documented in the audit working papers. Audit documentation also help the auditor to show and prove to the people, especially to the people who have authority, that a proper audit was managed in the company. So here are three purposes of audit documentation, which are first, to record the audit evidence to form the basis of the conclusion opinion. Second, to serve as evidence that the audit was planned and performed in accordance with auditing standard and applicable legal and regulatory requirements. And three, to provide evidence that the underlying accounting records agree and reconcile with the financial statement. This purpose shows how important audit documentation can provide support. Also, through audit documentation, there is a confidence that the audit that was performed was in accordance with the auditing standard. Next is factors affecting the form of audit documentation, which are first, the significance of the audit evidence obtained. Auditors generally need more documentation when the evidence is more significant. In other words, the evidence is critical to conclude the objective of the audit. Secondly, the need to document a conclusion or the basis for a conclusion is not readily determinable from the documentation of the work performed or audit evidence obtained. This is because auditors generally need more documentation when more judgment is needed in performing the work or evaluating the result. Auditors should document an overall conclusion, including the reason for it if the documentation of the result of the testing does not make the conclusion apparent. For conclusion, audit documentation support the auditor reports and prove the auditor compliance with auditing standard. Also, audit documentation can be regarded as a highly influential component of the audit process because reason that is contribute to an attempt to achieve a better result. This is because with documentation, the overall error chance is less since it reduces the risk of omission and error during the audit process itself. That's all from me. And for the next question, I will pass to Sidaina.
Thank you, Wan. Assalamualaikum. My name is DPA binti Bahir and my matrix number is 01DAT21F1064. I'm going to continue with question 2, which is explain the purpose of organizing audit working papers and how it should be organized. Documentation as working papers give a detailed record of the audit method, evidence gathered, and conclusion made during the audit. This paperwork is required to demonstrate the audit quality, truthfulness, and adherence to auditing standard and law. Evidence as the auditor's finding and conclusion are supported by working papers. Secondly, evidence. As the auditor's finding and conclusion are supported by working papers, the organization of the working paper assists the auditor in identifying and presenting the relevant evidence in a clear and logical way. References actively illustrate that a well-organized working paper can be used as a resource for future audits of the same client or sector. Furthermore, they can also be used to reply to regulatory requirements or other stakeholder inquiries or demands. On the other hand, planning and review. Frankly, the organization of working documents can assist the auditor in a better planning as well as executing the audit. In addition to this, it's easier for additional team members or supervisors in order to monitor and supervise the audit. In contrast, reference. This explicitly illustrates that a well-organized working paper can be used as a resource for future audit of the same client or sector. Furthermore, they can also be used to reply to regulatory client or other stakeholder inquiries or demands. To sum up everything, audit working document can be organized as part of the audit process. It contributes to the audit being true, well documented, and is in accordance with auditing standards and laws. Working paper for audit should be organized in a systematic and logical way, making them easy to read and understand. There are essential components of an audit working paper. Firstly, indexing and cross-reference, as working papers should be indexed and cross-referenced for accessibility of access and reference. Furthermore, title and reference, as contrast, each working paper should have a clear and descriptive title that represents the nature of the work conducted, along with the reference. Include the client's name, the name of the engagement, the date of work accomplished. In addition, objective and scope, as each working paper should provide a clear definition of the work purpose and scope. Besides, audit evidence, the working paper should provide a detailed description of the audit evidence obtained and the procedure performed to obtain such evidence and conclusion. The working paper should also document the auditor's conclusion on the audit evidence obtained. Moreover, signature and date in general for the working paper should be signed and dated by the auditor who prepared the working papers, reviewed by the supervisor, and approved by all the engagement partners. All in all, alternatively, working papers should be retained for a specific period as required by professional standard and regulatory requirements. By following this guideline, auditors can ensure that their working papers are well organized, easy to review, and provide a comprehensive audit trail. That's all for me. I will pass the presentation to my good member, Hafiz.
Thank you to my friends. So I will continue from my friends to answer the last question, which is question 3. The question is explain the purpose of using a statistical sampling for test of control and substantive test of transaction. Give example and justification on your answer. First of all, I would like to explain about sample approach first, which is sample approach has two types of sample approach, which is statistical sample approach and non-statistical sample approach. Next, I would like to explain in detail about type of sample approach, which is we statistical approach is a random selection of items and uses the probability theory to evaluate result. The non-statistical approach is selection of sample based on characteristic by the auditor. This is because non-statistical sampling does have characteristic. This is because auditor will use their professional judgment selection as well as to evaluate sample when conducting audit procedure. So next we move to the purpose of using non-statistical sampling for test of control. So audit procedure to test the test of control is audit procedure to test the effectiveness of a control used by a client entity to prevent or detect material misstatement. So purpose of the non-statistical sampling is auditor usually apply the attribute sampling method. Attribute sampling method is sampling approach that select a sample of from a population that possesses specific characteristics. Also, non-statistical sampling should be used only to prove a control is not effective by finding one or more errors and having tolerance for none. Also, audit sampling is used for various tests of control. Auditor use to test internal control, accounting system adequacy, and completeness of a transaction, and immediate review of validity of account balance. It deals with procedure of selection and specific of sample validation in testing the adequacy of establishing and implementation of control in the system of internal control of the company. So next we move to the purpose substantive test of transaction. So first of all, I would like to explain about the definition first. Substantive test of transaction is the audit procedure that examine the financial statement and supporting documentation to see if they contain errors. So these tests are needed to as evidence to support the assertion that the financial record of an entity are complete, valid, and accurate. Substantive testing is likely to include confirmation of account balance with third parties, such as confirming receivable, the calculations made by the client, such as as valuing inventory, and observing transaction being performed, such as the physical inventory. So, since there are many account balance and transaction in a year, auditor could design the sample be selected based on the size of population. Probability proportion to size is sampling design that divides a population into a small segment to enable an auditor to choose the sample for each segment. Each unit should have an equal chance of selection.